Thanks for that live report. Observing a traumatic event can impact a person's mental health, but what about their physical health?
Western Mass News reporter Olivia Hickey continues our team coverage live in studio after getting answers from a local doctor. Olivia, what did you find out?
Chris, Abby, whether you are directly impacted or just watching the mass shooting developments unfold on TV, the Bay State doctor I spoke with tells me any unplanned situation can impact a person's heart. A tragic shooting in Lewiston, Maine Wednesday night, killing 18 people and leaving the country in shock. An unannounced situation like this one can impact one's mental health.
The anxiety, the post-traumatic stress, depression, those can set in.
And physically, heart health is at risk as well. We spoke with Bay State Medical Center cardiologist Dr. Amir Ludfi Friday, who says people can be impacted by their fight or flight response, surging the body's epinephrine and raising blood pressure and elevating the heart rate.
If you're susceptible, if you have underlying heart issues or you have a weakened heart muscle or narrowing or blockage, these can put significant stress on your heart, and in rare instances can proceed to either an electrical abnormality or a heart attack.
He explains anyone directly involved or not can be impacted. Other conditions that can spur from a startling scenario can include a heart attack, arrhythmias or abnormal heartbeat, and broken heart syndrome.
A broken heart syndrome usually happens majority of time to patients who are older. They tend to be female. It's a sudden, acute, emotional or physical event that mimics a heart attack, but there's actually no blockage or minimal blockage in the blood vessels of the heart. Usually, if you get through the acute event, then your heart eventually recovers after 4 to 6 weeks of time.
Dr. Ludfi tells Western Mass News, over time, trauma can increase the risk of heart issues.
The domino effect, it could be that when you have tragic event like you described, and again extrapolating from earthquakes or hurricanes, traumatic things, that the stress of the events on people over time can increase the risk of heart issues from the baseline you had, say, from the previous year in that environment.
He advises people should be mindful of their body.
When they do happen, seeking help is crucial, making sure you take your medications. If you feel anything acutely, seek emergent help. Don't just say, oh, I'm under stress, especially if you have anything with the chest, jaw, arms, immediately seek medical attention.
Dr. Lofty notes that a person's mental health can also impact their physical health, which is why it's important to be aware of your mental state and seek help if needed. Reporting live in studio, Olivia Hickey for Western Mass News.